The storm above the great crucible did not rain water. It rained chemical sorrow, a heavy, oily downpour that sizzled when it struck the black volcanic sand of the arena floor. Above the massive amphitheater, lightning tore through the smog in jagged purple arteries, illuminating the faces of 10,000 spectators. They were the elite of Virkal, the Draconari nobility, safe behind shimmering anti-gravity balconies that hovered like golden saucers in the gloom. They watched with eyes that hunger, safe in their finery, waiting for blood or a miracle, in the center of the black sand, chained to 4 massive pylons of thrumming steel. The metallic dragon screamed. It was a sound that vibrated in the teeth of every living soul in the capital. The beast was a nightmare of engineering and malice, 40 feet of articulated alloy scales, hydraulic tendons, and a fusion reactor heart that pulsed with a blinding blue light. It thrashed against the containment fields, its claws gouging deep trenches into the obsidian ground. Steam rose in thick white columns where its superheated body met the rain. It did not look like a machine. It moved with the fluid, predatory grace of a living thing that hated being alive. High above the pit, on the central dais, Princess Saren watched the beast. She was a vision of terrifying beauty. Like all high-born Draconari, she was tall, possessing a lithe power that made human athletes look clumsy. Her skin was the color of polished obsidian, stark against the ceremonial armor that clung to her form like a second skin of liquid mercury. This was living metal, the crowning technology of her people, shifting subtly with her breath. Her eyes were molten coins of gold, burning with a cold, regal intelligence, and from her temples rose 2 swept-back horns crowned with filigree alloy, marking her royal lineage. She stepped to the edge of the balcony. The roar of the crowd died instantly. Her silence was louder than the storm. Saren raised a hand, her voice amplified by the arena acoustics, calm enough to freeze a riot. "If you are a true warrior," she said, the words echoing off the canyon walls, "tame my metallic dragon." The crowd erupted. It was a roar of worship mixed with a carnal appetite for violence. They chanted her name, a rhythmic thrum that shook the foundations of the seating tiers. Saren did not smile. She stood like a statue carved from judgment, looking down at the monster in the pit. The political stakes hung in the air, thicker than the sulfur smoke. The High Council was fracturing. 3 border systems had defected to the separatist movement in the last month alone. The Empire was bleeding, and Saren, the last scion of the unification line, had to prove she could hold the leash of the ultimate weapon. If she failed, the civil war would consume them all. If she succeeded, she would be the undisputed empress. But to succeed, someone had to ride the beast. "Bring the first challenger," Saren commanded. The massive iron gates at the north end of the arena ground open. The first suitor rode out on a hover chariot, a high lord of the southern ash wastes. He was clad in armor that cost more than a starship, wielding a lance tipped with disruptor energy. He looked magnificent. He looked invincible. He lasted 12 seconds. The metallic dragon did not even wait for him to dismount. The beast lunged, the heavy chains snapping taut but giving it just enough reach. It exhaled a torrent of blue plasma that vaporized the rain instantly, turning the air into a scalding fog. The High Lord's shields flared and died. The dragon's tail, a whip of serrated steel, lashed out with a sonic crack, shattering the hover chariot and sending the Lord tumbling into the black mud. The crowd gasped. The dragon roared, a sound of victorious mechanical fury. Next came the mercenaries, a trio of genetically tuned warriors from the off-world guilds, their muscles grafted with synthetic fibers, their reflexes dialed to post-human speeds. They worked as a team, flanking the beast, firing suppression nets and shock bolts. The dragon ignored the pain. It calculated. It anticipated. It moved with a terrifying precision, dodging the nets by mere inches, using the momentum of its own chains to swing its bulk around and crush two of them against the pylons. The third fled, tossing his weapon into the sand, his honor dissolved in terror. Then came the diplomat from the inner circle, a man who smiled with too many teeth and reeked of expensive perfumes and subtle poisons. He did not bring weapons. He brought override codes and a jamming device, confident that intellect would triumph over brute force. He walked toward the dragon with his hand outstretched, broadcasting a subjugation signal. The dragon simply stared at him. Its optic sensors narrowed, focusing like camera lenses. It did not roar. It waited until the diplomat was within 10 feet, then unleashed a directed pulse of magnetic interference from its throat. The diplomat's jamming device exploded in his hand. Stunned, he fell backward, scrambling away in the mud as the dragon snapped its jaws shut mere inches from his boots. It was humiliation, absolute and televised. For weeks, the failures mounted. The broadcasts went out to every corner of the fracturing empire. 90 failed, 92, 95. Broken lances lay scattered like toothpicks in the black sand. Melted shields were fused into the ground. The pride of the Draconari nobility was being dismantled, piece by piece, by a machine that refused to be owned. In the royal viewing box, the air was cold. Saren stood with her back rigid, watching the cleanup crews drag another unconscious suitor from the mud. "This is madness," a voice hissed behind her. Saren turned slowly. Archon Vale stood in the shadows, his robes shimmering with the iridescent weave of the High Council. He was old, his scales faded to a dusty gray, but his eyes were sharp and wet like fresh oil. "The people are losing faith," Saren, Vale said, stepping closer. "Every failure makes the council look weak. Every broken night makes the border systems bolder. End this charade." "I will not," Saren said, her voice low. "The right of the dragon is the only law they still respect. If I cancel it, I admit we have lost control." "We have already lost control," Vale snapped, though he kept his voice low enough to avoid the audio pickups. "The beast is defective. Transfer the codes to the council. We will dismantle it and build automated drones. Safe, predictable." Saren looked back at the dragon. It was pacing the length of its chains, watching the nobles in the stands. There was no mindlessness in that gaze. It was studying them. "It is not defective," Saren said. "It is waiting." "Waiting for what?" Vale sneered. "A god? A ghost? For a warrior," Saren said, turning her back on him. "And until one appears, the rite continues." Vale watched her go, his fingers twitching at his side. He tapped a command into his wrist link, a silent signal that went out to the darker corners of the capital. "If she wants a show," he whispered to the empty room, "we will give her a tragedy." Far below the glittering spires of the nobility, down in the smog-choked guts of the city, Jace stood on the rusted plating of Orbitport Dock 7 and kicked the landing strut of his ship. "Piece of junk," Jace muttered, wiping grease from his forehead with the back of a glove that was more oil than fabric. The ship, a battered salvage hauler named the Rusty Bucket, sat hissing on the pad. It looked like a brick with engines taped to it. It was ugly, slow, and smelled permanently of ozone and stale coffee, but it was the only home Jace had. And right now, it was being clamped by a magnetic lock that looked very expensive and very official. "Hey!" Jace shouted, waving a wrench at the dockmaster who was tapping a datapad a few yards away. "You cannot clamp me. I paid the docking fees." The dockmaster, a burly Draconari with a scar running through one eye, didn't even look up. Fees increased. The dockmaster grunted. Inflation. War tax? War tax? Jace scrambled down the ladder, his boots hitting the deck with a clang. I just got here. I am here to drop off a shipment of atmospheric scrubbers. I am supposed to get paid 3,000 credits. The dockmaster finally looked up. He smirked, revealing serrated teeth. The buyer canceled. He said the scrubbers were second rate. You owe 500 credits for the pad rental. Human. Payable now. Jace felt the cold knot of panic tighten in his stomach. He didn't have 500 credits. He didn't have 50. He had spent his last reserve fuel jumping to this system, banking everything on this delivery. Look, Jace said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. There has to be a mistake. The scrubbers are pristine. Let me talk to the buyer. Buyer is gone, the dockmaster said, crossing his massive arms. Pay up, or we seize the ship for scrap. Jace looked around. The docks were a chaotic swirl of activity. Drones buzzed overhead carrying crates. Steam vented from underground pipes. Draconari workers shouted in their guttural, melodic language. He was a human in a world of giants and dragons, a speck of dust in a war machine. He was broke, tired, and about to lose the only thing keeping him from vacuum. I can work it off, Jace offered, his pride stinging. I am a mechanic, a pilot. I can fix anything. Look at that loader over there, the servo is whining. I can tune that in 10 minutes. The dockmaster laughed, a dry barking sound. We have droids for that. Human. You have 1 hour. Find the credits, or find a new planet to walk on. The dockmaster turned and walked away, leaving Jace standing in the oily drizzle. Great, Jace whispered. Just great. Welcome to Verkal. Jace, enjoy the sights. Try not to starve. He shoved the wrench into his belt and started walking toward the commercial district, hoping to find a pawn shop or a desperate captain who needed a co-pilot. He moved with the hurried, hunch-shouldered gait of someone who owes money to bad people. He passed stalls selling charred meats on sticks and vendors hawking pieces of armor. The air smelled of sulfur and spices. He tried to navigate the crowd, but his human frame was jostled like a cork in a river. He accidentally bumped into a tall, silk-draped noble Draconari. Whoa, sorry, Jace said, instinctively reaching out to steady the noble. He offered his hand for a handshake, a universal human gesture of apology. The noble recoiled as if Jace had offered him a handful of radioactive waste. The surrounding crowd went silent. The noble stared at Jace's hand, then at his face, with a look of absolute revulsion. You dare, the noble hissed. You offer me your skin, unwashed, unbonded? Jace blinked. It is just a handshake. Buddy? Where I come from, it means, do not speak to me, filth, the noble spat, brushing off the sleeve where Jace had barely touched him. Jace pulled his hand back, face heating up. Right, no touching. Got it. Friendly place you have here. He hurried away before the noble could decide to call the guards. He needed to get off this rock. He needed a miracle. What he got was a riot. It started near the loading bay. A group of dock workers, angry about the wage cuts, started shouting at a security drone. A bottle was thrown, then a crate. Within seconds, the simmer of unrest boiled over into violence. Security forces in riot armor poured out of the side streets, swinging stun batons. Jace found himself caught in the crush. He tried to weave through the bodies, ducking under swinging arms and dodging thrown debris. Move, he shouted, trying to push through a wall of scales and armor. A small service drone, a hovering sphere with a painted smiley face, was knocked out of the air by a stray brick. It crashed to the ground, sparking. A massive cargo hauler, panicked by the noise, was reversing blindly toward it. Behind the hauler, a Draconari child, no older than 5, small and unarmored, had run out to grab the fallen drone. The child froze, staring up at the massive treads of the reversing vehicle. Nobody else saw it. The crowd was too busy fighting. The security cameras, however, were watching. Jace didn't think. He didn't weigh the political ramifications or the safety of his own skin. He just saw the math of the situation. Mass times acceleration equals dead kid. He lunged. Jace slid under the chaos, scrambling on hands and knees through the muck. He grabbed the child by the back of their tunic and rolled, throwing them both clear just as the hauler's treads crunched the service drone into scrap metal. They tumbled into a pile of refuse crates. Jace gasped. The wind knocked out of him. The child stared at him with wide, golden eyes, trembling. "You okay?" Jace wheezed. The child nodded slowly. "Good," Jace said, brushing ash off his jacket. "Stay here. Do not play in traffic." Before he could stand, a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see 3 palace guards, their armor gleaming, their weapons leveled at his chest. "There is the instigator," one of them shouted. "We saw him on the feeds. He started the panic to loot the cargo." "What?" Jace scrambled up, hands raised. "No, I was saving the kid, ask him." He pointed to the pile of crates, but the child had vanished, scurrying away into the shadows. "Classic," Jace muttered. "No good deed goes unpunished. Get on your knees," the guard commanded. "Listen, I am just a mechanic. I am not even from this system. I have a ship. I just want to pay my fine and leave." Silence. A heavy gauntlet struck Jace across the jaw. The world spun into darkness. He woke up in a room that was too clean to be a prison and too cold to be a guest room. The walls were made of the same living metal as the arena, shimmering with a faint bioluminescent pulse. There were no doors, only smooth, seamless walls. Jace sat up, rubbing his jaw. It throbbed. He checked his pockets. Empty. No wrench. No credits. "Well," Jace said to the empty room, "this is a step up from the brig. At least." A section of the wall dissolved into mist, and Princess Saren stepped through. Jace scrambled to his feet. He recognized her from the vid screens. The horns, the eyes, the aura of absolute command. She was even more intimidating in person. She smelled like ozone and expensive oil. She stopped 10 paces from him, studying him like he was a biological specimen in a jar. "You are the human," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the room. Jace straightened his jacket, trying to summon some dignity. "Jace, my name is Jace. You caused a riot at my docks. Jace, you disrupted trade. You assaulted a noble's peace of mind. I saved a kid," Jace argued, crossing his arms. "And your noble was a jerk." Saren tilted her head. A flicker of amusement crossed her face. It was a dangerous look. "The security logs are inconclusive," she said. "My advisors say you are a saboteur sent by the separatists. They want you executed." Jace swallowed hard. "That sounds extreme. I am just a salvage pilot. I pick up trash. I fix things. That is it." Saren circled him, her metal boots making no sound on the floor. "You move fast, human. For a species with no armor and brittle bones, your reflexes are adequate. Thanks? I think." Saren stopped in front of him. She was taller than him by a head. She leaned down, her golden eyes boring into his. "My council needs a scapegoat," she said softly. "Someone to blame for the unrest. An outsider. You are perfect, disposable, unknown." Jace felt a cold sweat break out on his back. "So that is it? You just toss me out the airlock?" "No," Saren said. "I am going to give you a choice. You can be executed for inciting a riot. Or you can enter the right." "The right?" Jace blinked. "You mean the dragon thing? The big metal monster that eats knights for breakfast? The metallic dragon, Saren corrected. Yeah, that, Jace laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. Lady, I am a mechanic. I do not ride dragons, I fix engines. I would last 2 seconds. You would likely die. Saren agreed, her face impassive. But if you enter, the charges are suspended. And if you win, though you will not, you would earn a seat on the council and enough wealth to buy your own planet. Jace looked at her. She wasn't offering him a chance. She was offering him a spectacle, a funny little human to die in the sand so the crowd could be distracted for 5 minutes. Why? Jace asked. Why me? Because 96 warriors have failed, Saren said, her voice tightening. And I am tired of watching arrogance dressed in armor. Perhaps it is time to feed the beast something different. She stepped closer. The heat radiating from her armor was palpable, a dry, feverish warmth. Jace could see the intricate circuitry laced through the living metal of her gorget. If you are a true warrior, she whispered, repeating the ritual phrase with a blade smile that was sharp enough to cut. Tame my metallic dragon. Jace looked at her. He saw the challenge in her eyes. She expected him to beg. She expected him to cry. He felt a spark of reckless anger. He was tired of being the small guy. He was tired of being broke. It is a machine, Jace said, his voice steady. Saren blinked. What? The dragon, Jace said. It is a machine. It has a reactor. It has servos. It has code. It is not a god. It is just a problem with wiring. Saren stared at him. For a moment, the mask of the princess slipped, and he saw genuine curiosity. She leaned in until her face was inches from his. He could see the flecks of copper in her golden irises. Then fix it, she said, or die trying. They gave him one night. They put him in a holding cell near the arena dungeons. They gave him a meal he couldn't eat and a suit of light flight armor that smelled like the last guy who died in it. Jace spent the first hour pacing. He spent the second hour checking the door seals. He spent the third hour trying to hotwire the lock panel with a spoon he had stolen from the dinner tray. He got the panel open. He stripped the wires. He sparked the connection. The door hissed open. Yes, Jace whispered. He slipped into the corridor and it was empty. He moved silently, keeping to the shadows, heading toward the ventilation shafts he had mapped out in his head from the intake grills. He was going to make it. He was going to steal a skimmer and get off this rock. He turned the corner and froze. Saren was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching him. She wasn't wearing her helmet. Her hair was a cascade of silver braids. She looked less like a princess and more like a predator waiting for a rabbit to bolt. Going somewhere? She asked. Jace straightened up, dropping the spoon, just stretching my legs. Saren didn't move to stop him. She just watched him. The hangar is that way, she said, pointing down the hall. You could probably steal a shuttle. You might even make orbit before the defense grid vaporizes you. Jace looked down the hall. Freedom was right there. But if you run, Saren said, her voice quiet, you prove them right. You prove that you are just a scavenger, a rat in the walls. Jace looked at her. He hated that she was right. He hated that somewhere deep down, he wanted to impress her. He wanted to show this terrifying, beautiful alien woman that he wasn't just space trash. He looked down the hall, then back at her. I am not a rat, Jace said. Then go back to your cell, Saren said, and get some sleep. You have a dragon to catch in the morning. She pushed off the wall and walked away, not looking back. Jace watched her go, then turned and walked back into his cell. He threw the spoon across the room. Idiot, he told himself. You are a colossal idiot. The morning came with the sound of drums. The arena gates groaned open. the heavy gears grinding together like tectonic plates. The light was blinding. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple. The crowd was screaming, a wall of noise that hit Jace like a physical blow. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. Challenger 97, the human. Jace walked out onto the black sand. He felt tiny. The arena was a canyon of noise and hostility. He wore the light armor they had given him, but he carried no weapon. He had refused the lance. He had refused the shield. He carried only a heavy diagnostic data pad hooked to his belt and a pair of fusion cutters. He walked toward the center of the pit. The metallic dragon was waiting. It was crouched low, its tail twitching. It looked bigger than it had on the screens. It looked like a mountain made of knives. The dragon's head snapped toward him. The massive eye lenses ignited with a crimson light, the apertures dilating as they locked onto him. Steam hissed from its nostrils. Jace stopped. He took a breath. He forced his hands to stop shaking. High above, in the royal box. Saren leaned forward, her hands gripping the railing. The announcer whispered the count, a sound that echoed into the silence of the anticipation. 96 failed. The dragon roared, and Jace stepped forward. The black sand of the great crucible crunched under Jace's boots like crushed glass. The air was thick enough to chew, tasting of ozone and the copper tang of dragon fear. 96 warriors had walked this path before him, and 96 warriors had been carried out in pieces or in shame. Jace felt the weight of 10,000 eyes boring into his back from the anti-gravity balconies, but he did not look up. He looked at the machine. The metallic dragon was a terrifying architecture of violence. Up close, the scale of it was nauseating. It was a mountain of interlocking alloy plates and hydraulic muscle, venting superheated steam that smelled of wet iron. But as Jace walked closer, his mechanic's eyes saw what the warlords and princes had missed. He saw the pylons. They were not just anchors. Heavy cables ran from the obsidian pillars directly into the base of the dragon's skull, glowing with a sickly, throbbing violet light. Jace stopped 10 yards away, the heat from the beast singeing his eyebrows. "Those aren't chains," Jace whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "They are neural dampers." He knew that tech. He had seen smaller, cruder versions used on illegal salvage drones to wipe their navigation cores. It was a lobotomy collar. It flooded the processor with white noise and pain spikes to prevent complex thought. The dragon wasn't raging because it was wild. It was raging because it was being tortured by a continuous signal of absolute agony. High above, Saren stood on the dais, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. She watched the small human figure freeze in the shadow of the beast. She expected him to draw a weapon, or to run, or to posture for the cameras. Instead, he just stood there, staring at the containment rig. "Why has he stopped?" Archon Vale muttered from behind her, his voice dripping with anticipation of the kill. "The beast will vaporize him." Saren did not answer. Inside her chest, a tight knot of anxiety refused to unravel. She told herself it was politics. She told herself she needed the right to last long enough to distract the populace. But as she watched Jace's solitary, unarmored silhouette against the massive bulk of the dragon, she felt a spike of anger at herself. She did not want to watch him burn. She realized, with a jolt of horror, that she wanted him to live. In the arena, the dragon lunged. It was a test, a snap of the jaws meant to induce panic. Jace scrambled backward, his boots slipping in the sand. The wind of the snap knocked him flat. The crowd roared, eager for the blood. The dragon reared back, its plasma vents glowing blue, preparing to bathe the sector in fire. Jace scrambled up. His instincts screamed at him to run, to hide. to find cover. But he knew machines. If you ran from a targeting sensor, it just tracked the motion. "Stop!" Jace yelled. He didn't shout a command. He didn't use the Draconari word for submit or kneel. He just shouted, his voice cracking with human desperation. The dragon hesitated. The damper collar flared with violet light, punishing the beast for the delay. And the dragon thrashed, smashing its tail into the pylon. Jace took a step forward. He held his hands up, palms open, empty. "I see it," Jace said. His voice was shaking, but he pitched it low under the roar of the crowd. "I see the collar. I know it hurts." The dragon froze, its massive head, heavy with armor plating and sensors, swiveled toward him. The optical lenses dialed in, zooming so close Jace could hear the servos whining. "You are jamming up," Jace said, talking to it like he talked to the engine of the rusty bucket when the hyperdrive was acting up. "The signal is scrambling your logic gates. You are not angry. You are just in a feedback loop." The dragon let out a sound that was not a roar. It was a low, static-filled whine, like a radio searching for a frequency. It leaned down, inches from Jace. "The heat was unbearable, you poor bastard," Jace whispered. Laughter erupted from the stands. It started in the lower tiers and swept up to the noble balconies. They were laughing at the absurdity of it. The human was talking to the weapon. He was cooing at the monster. "Look," a noble shouted over the amplifiers. "He thinks it is a pet." Saren did not laugh. She stared down, her golden eyes widening. She saw what the crowd missed. The dragon had not fired. The dragon was listening. Then the damper collar spiked. The violet light turned blinding white. The dragon shrieked, a sound of digital anguish, and convulsed. Its tail whipped around with blinding speed. Jace dove, but not fast enough. The heavy alloy tip caught him in the ribs, lifting him off the ground and throwing him 20 feet into the arena wall. He hit the stone with a sickening crunch and slid down, leaving a smear of red on the black rock. "Pull him out." Saren's voice cut through the laughter like a whip. "End the session." The infirmary smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Jace lay on a bio-bed, his chest wrapped in regeneration bandages. The pain was a dull thrumming in his background processing, kept at bay by the drugs they had pumped into him. He opened his eyes to see Saren standing over him. She had removed her ceremonial helmet, revealing the full severity of her features. Her hair was pulled back in a warrior's braid, exposing the delicate, shimmering scales that ran down her neck. She looked like a statue that had decided to walk off its plinth to judge the living. "You are alive," she stated. It sounded like an accusation. "Barely," Jace rasped. He tried to sit up and regretted it immediately. "Ow. Okay. Staying down." "Why didn't you beg?" Saren asked. She moved closer, the living metal of her armor shifting with her movement. When the beast lunged, when you realized you were outmatched. Most men scream. They plead for the guards. You just talked. Jace looked at the ceiling. Waste of breath. Besides, the dragon wasn't going to listen to begging. It is a machine, remember? You don't beg a toaster not to burn your bread. You adjust the settings. Saren's eyes narrowed. You called it you. Force of habit, Jace lied. He looked at her then, really looked at her, beneath the terrifying armor and the golden eyes. She looked exhausted. There was a tension in her jaw that spoke of long nights and too many enemies. You saved me, Jace said. You stopped the fight. I preserved a council asset, Saren corrected, her voice cooling. We need a scapegoat, remember? You are no use to me dead until the rite is concluded. Right, Jace said, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Purely political. That is why you are here in the medical wing at 3 in the morning instead of sleeping on your pile of gold or whatever princesses do. Saren bristled. Her pride was a physical thing, sharp and brittle. Do not presume to know my schedule. Human. Your skin is soft. You break easily. It is inconvenient. My skin heals, Jace shot back. At least I am not wearing a suit that does the breathing for me. It was a low blow, and he saw her flinch. The armor was a symbol of her station, but it was also a barrier. I am going to train you, Saren said suddenly. Jace blinked. Excuse me? I am going to train you myself, she said. The council wants you to fail. They want a spectacle. I have decided I am bored with their script. She leaned over the bed, her hand resting on the rail near his head. Her claws were inches from his face. You have a strange instinct. Jace, you saw something in the arena. I want to know if it was luck, or if you are actually useful. And if I say no, then you go back in tomorrow unprepared, Saren said simply. And next time, the dragon will not miss. The training began 2 days later, and it was less like education and more like systemic torture. Saren took him to the gravity chambers deep beneath the palace. It was a circular room where the artificial gravity could be cranked up to crush bones. Stand, Saren commanded. Jace tried. The gravity was set to 1.5 standard. His blood felt like lead. His knees buckled. In the Draconari style, we root ourselves like the mountain, Saren lectured, walking effortlessly through the heavy field. We absorb the force. Yeah. Well, Jace wheezed, pouring sweat. Humans. We don't root. We adjust. He didn't try to stand straight. He leaned into the gravity, shifting his center of mass, moving with a strange, loping efficiency. It wasn't graceful, but he stayed upright. Saren watched him, her brow furrowed. He was doing it wrong, yet he was still standing. They moved to the heat tunnels. The air was a scorching 120 degrees, designed to test the thermal regulation of Draconari armor. Jace was in his flight suit, stripping off layers until he was down to a tank top, dripping wet. Saren stood fully armored, unaffected. Focus your mind, she said. Ignore the heat. I can't ignore physics, Jace snapped, wringing out his shirt. I am a mammal. We regulate temperature by sweating. It is gross, but it works. Do you ever take that can off? I am a warrior of the high blood, Saren said stiffly. We do not disrobe in training. You are going to cook in there, Jace muttered. Later, in the aerial harness rigs. Jace swung wildly from a cable, trying to simulate mounting a moving dragon. He spun, tangled the line, and ended up hanging upside down, face to face with Saren. Greetings, Earthling, Jace deadpanned. Saren sighed. This is hopeless. You have no dignity. Dignity doesn't keep you on a hull in 0G, Jace said, swinging back and forth. Grip does. And you know what? Your saddles are designed for tails. I don't have a tail. That is a design flaw. It is not a flaw, Saren corrected. It is anatomy. It is bad engineering, Jace insisted. The palace AI, a floating orb of blue light named Curator, hovered nearby, translating Jace's slang into formal high Draconari. The human suggests the royal equipment is deficient in its tactile interface parameters. Curator droned. He means the seat sucks, Saren said, surprising Jace. He looked at her. She was smiling, just a little. It transformed her face, cracking the marble mask of the princess and showing the woman underneath. Through it all, the metallic dragon watched. Its containment pit had feeds into the training rooms. Jace noticed it on the 3rd day, when Saren set up an obstacle course of heavy pylons. Jace came back from a water break to find the pylons shifted. The angles were different, harder. Who moved these? Jace asked. Saren looked at the logs. No one. The system shows no inputs. Jace looked up at the camera in the corner of the room. The lens zoomed in. It is testing us, Jace said. It is bored. It wants to see if I can handle the variables. Saren looked at the camera, then at Jace. The dragon was not a beast. It was a student, learning its enemy. The tension between them changed on a Tuesday evening, in the quiet of the armory. Jace had torn his knuckles open on a jagged piece of training metal. He was sitting on a bench, trying to wrap the bandage one-handed. "Give me that," Saren said. She sat next to him. The proximity was startling. She smelled of cold metal and something organic, like crushed spices. She took his hand. Her gauntlets were removed, revealing hands that were covered in fine, dark scales, tipped with razor-sharp black claws. Jace flinched, expecting a cut. "Be still," Saren murmured. She wrapped the bandage with terrifying precision. Her claws, lethal enough to tear through starship hull, moved with a delicacy that made Jace's breath catch in his throat. She tucked the end of the cloth and smoothed it down. She didn't let go of his hand immediately. "You have scarred hands," she said, tracing a white line on his palm with the tip of a claw. "For a man who claims to be a pilot." "Salvage is rough work," Jace said. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet room. "You break things to fix things. And what are you trying to fix here, Jace?" Saren asked, looking up. Her golden eyes were vast and deep. "I don't know," Jace admitted. "Maybe just my chances of survival." Saren stood up abruptly, pulling her hand away. The air between them crackled, charged with something that wasn't politics and wasn't war. She turned away, unclasping the shoulder seals of her armor. It was a rare breach of protocol. She slid the heavy pauldrons off, rolling her shoulders under the armor. She wore a bodysuit of thin, dark mesh, her skin, exposed at the neck and shoulders, pulsed with a faint bioluminescent pattern, swirls of soft gold light that drifted under the obsidian surface of her flesh. It was beautiful. It was intimate. Jace looked away, turning his gaze to the floor. Saren paused. "You do not look? It is private, isn't it?" Jace said. "The lights. That is not for public display." "No," Saren said softly. "It is not. It is a sign of emotion. Flush." She turned to face him. He still didn't look. "Look at me, Jace." He looked up. The lights on her skin were swirling faster. She looked frightened, and that terrified him more than the dragon. "Why are you different?" she asked. "You are weak. You are poor. You are alien. And yet, you see things the council ignores. You see the dragon. You see me." "Maybe I am just looking for the cracks in the hull," Jace said, his voice rough. "That is where the truth is." They were standing too close. Jace could feel the heat radiating off her. He wanted to reach out, to touch the lights on her shoulder, to see if they were warm. He saw her eyes flicker to his lips, and they both froze on the precipice. To cross that line was treason, and it was madness. Saren stepped back, her breath hitching. "I do not control the dragon," she whispered. The confession tumbled out of her. "What?" "The right," she said, turning away to hide her face. "It is a lie. I do not command the beast. I only endure it. I survive it. The council gives me codes, sequences. But the dragon hates me. It hates us all. I am not a tamer. I am just a jailer in a golden mask." Jace stared at her back. The vulnerability of the admission staggered him. Jace walked over to the console where the telemetry data from the dragon's pit was scrolling. He had been studying it for days. "Saren, look at this." She joined him, composing herself. "What is it?" This pulse. Jace pointed to a rhythmic spike in the data stream. It happens every 4 seconds. It is buried under the noise of the neural damper. It looks like a heartbeat, but it is too precise. He tapped a few keys, isolating the signal. It is a command string, Jace said. External. Someone is beaming a signal directly into the dragon's cortex. It is not random rage. It is a loop. Attack, reset, attack, reset. Saren's face went cold. A remote override. Someone wants to make sure no one tames it, Jace said. Someone wants the failures to keep happening. Who? Saren asked, though her eyes said she already suspected. Jace looked at her. The council? Vale? Saren gripped the console. If this is true, then the right is a rigged game, and you are walking into a trap tomorrow. Tomorrow? The council has moved the schedule up, Saren said. They demand a second attempt, tomorrow morning. They want you dead. Jace, they are tired of waiting. Jace looked at the screen, then at the door. Then we have to change the game, he said. The arena was different the second time. The air was colder. The crowd was quieter, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Jace walked out without the armor. He wore his grease-stained flight suit. He looked small and incredibly fragile against the backdrop of black sand and towering walls. Saren stood on the dais. She held the microphone. Protocol dictates the challenger approach with a weapon. The announcer's voice boomed. Override. Saren's voice cut in, sharp and absolute. The challenger will approach with nothing. A murmur went through the crowd, in the council box. Archon Vale stood up, his hands gripping the velvet rail. What is she doing? He hissed. Jace walked toward the dragon. The beast was already thrashing, the neural dampers flaring violet. The external signal was pounding into its brain, commanding violence. Jace stopped 20 feet away. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, blocking out the smell of sulfur and the roar of the crowd. He started to hum. It was a simple tune, nothing heroic, just an old folk song from his home colony, a rhythm his mother used to hum when the atmospheric scrubbers rattled the walls. A steady, low vibration. He didn't just hum with his voice. He tapped his thigh in time with the beat. He projected a sense of absolute rhythmic calm. The dragon lunged and stopped. The beast's head tilted. The massive audio receptors on the side of its skull rotated forward. Jace kept humming. He stepped in time with the rhythm. Step, pause, step, pause. He was giving the dragon something the neural dampers couldn't suppress. A pattern, a logic. Machines loved patterns. They craved order in chaos. The dragon's eye lenses dilated. The violet light on the damper collar flickered. The external command signal, attack, reset, was being interrupted by a new input. Rhythm, pattern, safety. The dragon lowered its head. It didn't bow. It just leaned in to hear better. Silence fell over the arena. 10,000 people held their breath. Jace opened his eyes. He was 10 feet from the snout of a machine that could bite a tank in half. I hear you, Jace whispered to the dragon. I hear the noise they put in your head. Listen to me instead. The dragon let out a soft vent of steam. Its tail, which had been lashing like a whip, settled into the sand in the council box. Vale was pale. This is impossible, he whispered. The override. Why isn't it working? Shut it down, he barked into his comms. Shut the audio feeds. Alarms blared suddenly throughout the arena. Red strobe lights flashed. Safety breach. The automated system roared. Containment failure imminent. The dragon recoiled, the moment broken. The dampers slammed back on. Full power. The beast shrieked in agony. Run! Saren shouted from the dais, breaking protocol. "Jace, run!" Jace didn't run. He backed away slowly, keeping eye contact with the dragon. "I will come back," he mouthed. "I promise." He turned and jogged toward the gate as the containment field snapped up, walling the dragon off in a cage of hard light. That night, Jace lay on his bunk in the guest quarters, staring at the ceiling. His heart was still hammering against his ribs. It had worked. For 10 seconds. It had worked. The dragon wasn't a monster. It was a prisoner, and it was desperate for connection. He heard a faint zit sound near the ventilation grate. Jace sat up. "Hello?" A tiny drone, no larger than a hornet, dropped from the vent. It was matte black, lightless. Before Jace could move, it fired a microscopic dart into his neck. "Ow!" Jace slapped his neck, pulling out a thin silver needle. He felt a cold sensation spread through his veins. Not poison. A tracer. The drone hovered for a second, then projected a laser onto the far wall. It burned letters into the metal paneling, the smell of scorched paint filling the room. "Stop listening to the dragon." The drone fizzled and dissolved into a pile of gray dust. Jace touched the spot on his neck. He looked at the message smoking on the wall. He wasn't just a scapegoat anymore. He was a threat. And he knew exactly what he had to do next. The message burned into the wall of Jace's quarters was not just a threat. It was a map. To a mechanic, a warning to stop looking at the engine usually indicated exactly where the engine was broken. Jace stood before the scorched metal, tracing the letters with a thumb that still smelled of ozone from the arena. "They are scared," Jace said, his voice low in the silent room. Saren stood by the door, her silhouette framed by the harsh light of the corridor. She had bypassed the security locks with a wave of her signet ring, but her posture suggested she was the intruder. "They breached royal quarters," she said, her tone cold and brittle. "A drone in the guest wing. That is impossible without override codes from the inner circle." "It means we are close to the wiring," Jace said, turning to face her. "The dragon isn't just a weapon, Saren. It is a vault, and someone is terrified we are going to crack the combination. We need to move," Saren said, "now, before they scrub the logs." The next 3 hours were a descent into the belly of the Empire. They did not go to the glittering council chambers or the sunlit aviaries. They went down into the sub-levels of the palace where the air recycling systems hummed like dying whales, and the walls were lined with conduit pipes thick as tree trunks. Saren moved with the authority of a storm front, clearing checkpoints with sharp commands that brokered no argument. Jace moved like water, slipping through shadows, checking corners, his eyes scanning for cameras and sensor trips. "You handle the guards," Jace whispered as they approached a heavy blast door marked with the symbol of the old dynasty. "I will handle the tech. This is the deep archive," Saren said, her voice echoing in the damp tunnel. "It has been sealed since my grandfather's reign." Jace knelt by the keypad. It was ancient, a physical interface rather than a holographic one. He pulled a multi-tool from his belt. "Old tech is just new tech that learned how to keep secrets," Jace muttered. He shorted the mechanism. The heavy doors groaned, the hydraulic fluid thick and sluggish, and parted just enough for them to slip inside. The room beyond was a graveyard of information. Rows of crystalline data stacks rose into the darkness, covered in decades of dust. The air was stale, preserving the silence of history. Jace connected his datapad to the central terminal. The screen flickered to life, casting a blue pallor over Saren's face. "Search for the command string I found in the dragon's telemetry," Jace said. "The pulse. It has to match a project file." Saren typed the sequence. Her gauntleted fingers clacked against the glass console. Project Auric. She read aloud. The file opened. It was not a blueprint for a machine. It was a roster. Jace watched as the images scrolled by. They were not schematics of gears and pistons. They were faces, pilots from the separatist wars, dissidents who had vanished during the Unity purges, artists who had spoken too loudly against the throne. God. Jace breathed, captured cognition. Saren read, her voice trembling. The metallic dragon. It is not an AI. It is a gestalt. She stepped back from the console as if it had burned her. They stripped their minds, she whispered. They took the tactical brilliance of enemy aces, the endurance of political prisoners, the rage of the oppressed, and they welded them together into a single, agonizing consciousness. Jace looked at the screen. Thousands of neural maps, overlaid, compressed, and shackled by the inhibitor collar. The dragon wasn't a beast. It was a mass grave that refused to die. My family, Saren said, her voice cracking. My legacy. We did not build a guardian. We built a prison of stolen souls. She turned away, walking into the shadows between the data stacks. The regal armor suddenly looked too heavy for her frame. She leaned against a pillar, her head bowed, her breathing ragged. Jace watched her. The instinct to fix things, to tighten a bolt, to patch a leak rose in him, but he shoved it down. You couldn't fix this with a wrench. He walked over to her. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, close enough to block the draft from the door, close enough that she knew she wasn't alone in the dark. Saren looked up. Her eyes, usually molten gold, were dark with horror. I am a monster, she said. The blood of this crime is in my veins. I have been demanding warriors tame a creature that is screaming for help in 1,000 voices. You didn't know, Jace said. I should have known, Saren snapped, pushing off the pillar. I am the heir. Ignorance is not a shield. Jace, it is just another form of cowardice. She paced the small aisle, her claws clicking on the floor. I have to destroy it, she said. I have to kill the dragon. It is the only mercy. No, Jace said. Saren spun on him, eyes blazing. Do not tell me what is mercy, human. You do not understand the weight of this honor. I understand that you don't kill a prisoner just because you feel guilty about the jail, Jace said, his voice hard. You free them. Saren stopped. The anger drained out of her, leaving her hollow. She slumped against the console, her shoulders shaking. I cannot, she whispered. I am alone. The council, the generals, the court, they are all part of the machine. You are not alone, Jace said. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with the hum of the cooling fans and the thudding of their own hearts. Saren looked at him. She looked at his grease-stained jacket, his unkempt hair, the stubborn set of his jaw. He was everything she was not allowed to be. Messy, free, real. Why are you still here? She asked softly. You could have taken a ship. You know the truth now. You know we are monsters. Why stay? Jace looked at her. He thought about the credits he needed. He thought about the safety of deep space. Then he thought about the way she had bandaged his hand. Because I don't think you are a monster, Jace said. I think you are just a pilot stuck in a ship you didn't build, trying to keep it from crashing. Saren let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. You have a terrible habit of simplifying catastrophe, she said. It is a survival trait, Jace said. Saren took a step closer. The distance between them shrank to nothing. Jace could feel the heat of her, the biological warmth radiating through the gaps in her armor. I have not allowed anyone this close to me in 10 years, Saren confessed, her voice barely audible. Not since Kalen. Your war bond? Jace asked. My husband, she corrected. He died in the first wave of the border revolts. I felt his heart stop through our link. Since then, I have been iron. I have been stone. And now, Saren said, looking up at him with a terrifying vulnerability, I feel like I am waking up, and it hurts. She reached out, her hand hovering near his face. She didn't touch him, but the intent was there, heavy and electric. Jace swallowed hard. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Saren, he said, his voice rough, you need to be careful. Why? Because wanting you, Jace said, looking straight into her eyes, feels like stepping into an engine intake while it is running. It is dangerous. It is going to burn. Saren smiled, a sad, sharp expression. Then burn with me, she whispered. She leaned in. Jace leaned in. The air between them seemed to ionize. He could smell the scent of her skin, amber and electricity. His hand rose, trembling, to touch the side of her face, his fingers grazing the cold metal of her jawline. They froze there, lips inches apart, the magnetic pull so strong it was physical pain. They both knew what a kiss would mean. It wouldn't just be romance. It would be a political detonation. It would be a surrender. Jace pulled back. It took every ounce of willpower he possessed. We can't, he said, his voice shaking. Not while we are in the crosshairs. If I kiss you now, I am not going to be thinking about the dragon, and we need to think about the dragon. Saren exhaled, a shudder running through her frame. She nodded, stepping back, putting the cold air back between them. You are right, she said, composing herself, though her hands were still trembling. You are infuriatingly right. Jace ran a hand through his hair, trying to dispel the tension. My grandmother used to say, don't try to romance the volcano while you are standing in the lava. Saren stared at him. She blinked. That is a proverb? She asked. It is now, Jace said. Humans, Saren said, a ghost of a smile returning to her lips. You are emotionally reckless mammals. Jace grinned, though his pulse was still racing. And you are a high-maintenance lizard with a superiority complex. We are a terrible team. The best kind, Saren said. The moment of levity broke as the console behind them beeped. A priority alert flashed on the screen. It is Vale, Saren said, her demeanor snapping back to steel. He has initiated a motion in the High Council. She read the scrolling text, her face paling. A security transfer, she said. They are claiming the dragon is too unstable for the right. They are moving to install a remote neural link directly from the council chamber. They are going to joystick it, Jace said. If they do that, Saren said, they will wipe the cognition core. They will erase the minds inside to make room for the control software. The witnesses, the souls, they will be gone. We need to prove it, Jace said. We need to show the people what is inside that thing before Vale wipes it. How? Saren asked. The interface is hardwired into the beast's brainstem. You would have to be standing on its neck to access it. Jace looked at the schematic. He looked at the dragon's anatomy. I can do it, Jace said. Saren shook her head. No. You will be killed. I can do it, Jace repeated. But I need a cover. I need a distraction big enough to keep the cameras on me and the guards off the field. You mean another attempt, Saren realized. I mean a finale, Jace said. The arena was a cauldron of noise. The news of the security transfer had leaked, and the crowd was in a frenzy, sensing that the old ways were dying. The storm clouds above were black and purple, mirroring the bruising on the Empire's soul. Saren stood on the dais. She wore her full ceremonial armor, a gleaming figure of gold and obsidian, but her face was pale. She looked down at the gate where Jace was waiting. Do not die, She whispered to the wind. "Please, do not die." The gates opened. Jace walked out. He was not wearing armor. He was not wearing the flight suit. He was wearing clean civilian clothes, a simple tunic and trousers. He looked like a man walking to the market, not a warrior walking to his death. He had the data pad tapped to the inside of his wrist, hidden by his sleeve. The metallic dragon was screaming. The neural dampers were dialed to maximum, the violet light blinding. The beast was thrashing against the pylons, tearing up the bedrock. Jace walked steadily. He didn't hum this time. He didn't sneak. He walked with the heavy, purposeful stride of a mechanic who knows exactly what is wrong with the machine. He stopped 10 feet from the dragon. The heat was scorching and the plasma breath singed the air around him. The dragon lunged, its jaws snapping shut inches from Jace's face. Jace didn't flinch. He looked straight into the massive, burning eye lens. "I know who you are," Jace said. His voice was amplified by the small comms unit on his collar, booming through the arena speakers. The crowd went silent. "I know you aren't a monster," Jace said. "I know you are 1,000 people screaming in the dark." The dragon froze. The mention of the truth, the acknowledgement of the collective mind, hit it harder than a lance. "I am not here to own you," Jace said, raising his hand. He stepped forward. The dragon pulled back, confused. The programming screamed attack, but the minds inside screamed, "Listen." Jace reached out and placed his hand on the dragon's snout. The metal was vibrating with the force of the reactor. "I am here to ask you," Jace said softly. "What do you want?" The metallic dragon lowered its head. It was not a bow of submission. It was a bow of exhaustion. It let out a long, shuddering vent of steam. Then, with a speed that blurred the air, the dragon whipped its head up and roared. It wasn't a roar of aggression. It smashed its head into the nearest pylon, shattering the neural damper. The violet light died in the council box. Archon Vale smashed his fist onto the table. "He has broken the conditioning," Vale shouted. "Override, now!" The emergency sirens wailed. In the arena, the dragon's eyes suddenly went blank. The vibrant, pained intelligence vanished, replaced by a cold, dead blue light. The beast went rigid. Jace stumbled back. He saw the shift. The dragon wasn't moving naturally anymore. It jerked like a marionette on invisible strings. The council had taken control. The dragon raised a claw, not with animal fury, but with robotic precision, and swatted Jace aside. He tumbled across the sand, the breath knocked out of him. Security teams flooded the arena floor. Drones descended from the sky. Jace was hauled to his feet by 2 armored guards. His datapad was ripped from his wrist. "Sabotage!" the announcer screamed. "The human has used illegal tech to corrupt the beast." Saren watched from the dais, her heart turning to ice. It was a setup. They had let him get close just to prove the dragon needed secure control. Archon Vale's face appeared on the massive arena screens. "The right is compromised," Vale declared smoothly. "The human is a terrorist. Princess Saren, do your duty. Denounce him, order his execution, and restore order." The camera drone swarmed Saren. Her face was projected 50 feet high above the screaming crowd. She looked at Jace. He was on his knees in the sand, blood running down his forehead, held at gunpoint. He looked up at her. He didn't beg. He just shook his head slightly, as if to say, "Don't do it." Saren looked at Vale. She looked at the mindless, enslaved dragon. She looked at the empire that demanded blood to keep the gears turning. She reached up and unclasped her ceremonial cape. It fell to the floor in a heavy pool of silk. "No," Saren said. The word rang out like a bell. "I will not denounce him," Saren said, her voice rising. "The human speaks the truth. The dragon is not a weapon. It is a crime scene, and this council are the criminals. The crowd gasped. The shockwave of her defiance silenced the riots. "Seize her!" Vale shrieked. "She is a traitor!" The palace dissolved into chaos. Saren didn't wait for the guards to reach the dais. She vaulted over the railing, activating her gravity boots, and plummeted toward the arena floor. She landed in a crouch between Jace and the firing squad, her arm blades snapping out. "Get up!" she yelled, slashing through the rifle of the nearest guard. Jace scrambled to his feet. "You just threw away your crown! I never liked it!" Saren gritted out, blocking a stun baton with her forearm. It was too heavy. They fought back to back. Jace used a discarded shield, bashing a drone out of the air. Saren was a whirlwind of lethal grace, her living metal armor deflecting blaster bolts. "We need to go," Jace shouted. "The exits are sealed. Not all of them." Saren grabbed his arm. She dragged him toward the maintenance hatch near the dragon's waste chutes. It was a desperate, filthy route, but it was the only one the council wouldn't be guarding yet. They blasted the hatch open and dove into the dark. They stopped in a secure safe room deep in the bedrock, a forgotten bunker from the Civil War era. The sounds of pursuit were distant but closing in. Saren leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Her armor was scored with carbon blasts. Jace was wiping blood from his eye. They were safe for maybe 10 minutes. Saren looked at Jace. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold clarity. "You can't stay with me," she said. "I am a traitor now. Every hunter in the galaxy will be looking for my head." Jace laughed, a dry, coughing sound. "I think I am on that list too, Princess." Saren walked over to him. She reached into a pouch at her belt and pulled out a heavy ring. It was her personal signet, the key to her private accounts and off-world safe houses. She pressed it into his hand. "Take the service tunnels east," she said. "There is a smuggler's port in the ash wastes. This ring will buy you passage to the outer rim. You can disappear, Jace. You can survive." Jace looked at the ring. It was heavy, warm from her skin. He looked up at her. "And what about you?" "I will stay," Saren said. "I will draw their fire. I will buy you time." Jace closed his hand over the ring. Then he shoved it back into her hand. "No," he said. "Jace, I am not running. Saren, I told the dragon I wasn't there to own it. And I am telling you, I am not here for the money." Saren stared at him. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with unshed tears. "If you stay," she whispered, her voice trembling, "there is no coming back. We will be hunted until we die. It is a death sentence." Jace stepped closer. He took her hands, the dangerous clawed hands of a dragon woman, and held them tight. "Better a death sentence with you than a life sentence without you," he said. Saren let out a sob that broke her composure completely. She gripped his hands, her claws retracting, her forehead dropping to rest against his. "If you run, I will understand," she breathed against him. "But if you stay, I won't survive it alone. I am staying," Jace said. "We are going to free that dragon, and we are going to burn their whole damn conspiracy to the ground." Saren lifted her head. The fear in her eyes hardened into resolve. The golden fire returned. "Then we need to move," she said. "The molten tunnels are the only way out. The escape was a nightmare of heat and noise. They ran through the geothermal maintenance shafts, suspended on narrow catwalks above rivers of flowing magma that powered the city. The heat was suffocating. Alarms howled like wolves. Red lights bathed the industrial hellscape in blood. "Up ahead!" Jace shouted over the roar of the magma. A squad of council drones blocked the catwalk. Saren didn't slow down. She accelerated, her armor shielding Jace as she smashed through the line of machines, sending them tumbling into the lava below. They reached the exterior vent. Jace hot-wired the blast door while Saren held off a team of elite guards with suppressing fire from a stolen rifle. The door hissed open. The cool night air of the Virkal was a shock to their lungs. They stumbled out onto the ash dunes, the city lights glowing behind them like a burning infection. A massive hologram projected above the palace towers showed Saren's face, overlaid with the word traitor. They stood in the dark, panting, alive. Jace looked back at the palace. Somewhere in there, the metallic dragon was chained, its mind enslaved by the people who had just outlawed them. "We have to go," Saren said, pulling him toward the shadows of the waste, "but we will be back." Jace took her hand. This time, he didn't pull away. "Yeah," Jace said, looking at the distant spire where the dragon waited. "We have a friend to break out of jail." They turned and ran into the night, two sparks flying from a fire that was just beginning to catch. The royal hangar of the Virkal Palace was a cathedral of brushed steel and silence, designed to intimidate anyone foolish enough to walk through its doors. Currently, however, the silence was being ruined by the screech of high-velocity plasma fire and the frantic cursing of a human mechanic. "Get it started!" Saren shouted. She was standing at the base of the boarding ramp, her left arm raised, the gauntlet projecting a hard light shield that shimmered under a hail of blaster bolts. 3 royal guards were pinned down behind a fuel loader, firing with the precision of men who knew they would be executed if they let the princess escape. "I am trying," Jace yelled back. He was upside down under the control console of a sleek, needle-nosed stealth skimmer. "This wiring is ancient. It is not even standard binary. It is trinary logic gates. Who builds a ship with trinary logic?" "It is the old tongue of engineering," Saren replied, gritting her teeth as a bolt impacted her shield, sending a shockwave up her arm. "Just bypass the authentication node. If I bypass the node, the anti-theft system vents neurotoxin into the cockpit." Jace scrambled out from under the dash, grease smeared across his cheek. "I need 10 seconds to loop the sensor feed. You have 5, Saren said. She dropped the shield and lunged. It was a blur of motion that the human eye could barely track. She closed the distance to the guards in 3 strides, her armored boots cracking the polished floor. She didn't use her claws. She used her weight and the kinetic servos in her suit. She shoulder-checked the first guard, sending him flying 20 feet into a stack of cargo crates. She spun, sweeping the legs of the second, and grabbed the third by his breastplate, throwing him into his partner. That it was brutal, efficient, and over in 4 seconds. Jace twisted 2 wires together. A spark showered down onto the pilot's seat. The engines of the skimmer whined to life, a low, predatory hum that vibrated in the chest. "Got it!" Jace shouted. "Get in!" Saren vaulted up the ramp. Jace punched the throttle before the door was even sealed. The skimmer shot forward, blowing the hangar blast doors off their hinges with a concussion of repulsor force. They screamed out into the night sky, weaving through the spires of the capital city at Mach 2. Jace wrestled with the yoke. The ship handled like a dream, but the cockpit was a nightmare. Everything was illuminated in a harsh, throbbing blue light. "Why is it so dark in here?" Jace complained, squinting at the altimeter. "And why is every surface glowing blue? I can barely read the fuel gauge." "It is ambient mood lighting," Saren said, strapping herself into the co-pilot seat. "It is terrible," Jace said. "It is like flying inside a neon sign." "It is a tactical intimidation feature," Saren countered, adjusting her armor. "It reminds the pilot of the cold void. It sharpens the senses. It gives me a headache," Jace muttered. "Next time we steal a ship, we are stealing a cargo hauler. At least they have warm white LEDs." They cleared the city perimeter, the lights of the capital fading into the volcanic smog behind them. Jace banked the ship hard toward the upper atmosphere, aiming for the trade lanes where they could vanish into traffic. Suddenly, the console screamed. It wasn't a radar lock, it was a comms burst. Jace's hands flew across the controls. We are being hailed? No, that is not right. This isn't a voice frequency. It is raw data. Block it, Saren said. It could be a tracker virus. Wait, Jace said. He stared at the scrolling hexadecimal code cascading down the blue-lit screen. I know this syntax. He tapped a sequence into the interface. The noise filtered out, leaving a repeating set of navigational coordinates. It is the dragon, Jace whispered. Saren looked at him sharply. That is impossible. The Council has it under total lockdown. They have the body locked down, Jace said. But they just plugged it into the citywide network to control it. The dragon is using their own bandwidth to shout at us. He pointed to the screen. It is sending us a location, Jace said. Deep in the ash wastes. Sector 4. Sector 4 is a dead zone, Saren said. It is old radiation shielding and scrap. There is nothing there. The dragon thinks there is, Jace said. He punched the coordinates into the nav computer, and right now, that machine is the only friend we have left. They ditched the Royal Skimmer 2 systems over, trading it for anonymity at a shady transfer hub, and eventually made their way to Ring Station Omega. It was a rusted halo of metal orbiting a gas giant, a place where the Empire's laws were treated as polite suggestions rather than rules. They needed Jace's ship. The rusty bucket had been impounded here months ago for unpaid parking fees, a fact Jace had conveniently forgotten until now. Saren walked through the crowded concourse, and for the first time in her life, she looked small. She wore a heavy scavenger's cloak made of rough gray wool, the hood pulled low to hide her horns. Her armor was covered by the rags, but her walk, the prowling, dangerous gait of a predator, was harder to disguise. Keep your head down, Jace murmured, guiding her through a throng of methane breathers. If anyone sees those eyes, we are dead. The bounty on you is higher than the station's GDP. I do not like hiding, Saren hissed from beneath the cowl. It smells like grease and despair in here. That is just the local atmosphere, Jace said. You get used to it. They found the rusty bucket clamped in a lower docking bay. It looked even worse than Jace remembered. The hull was patched with mismatched plating, and the port engine drooped slightly. Behold, Jace said, spreading his hands, the chariot of freedom. Saren stared at it. It looks like it has already crashed, she said. Twice. It has character. Jace defended. Come on. I know the dockmaster. I can bribe him with the spare parts from the skimmer. They secured the ship. But the victory was short-lived. The station went on high alert. The Council's reach was longer than they thought. Hunter drones were scanning the docking manifests. They had to launch immediately, without refueling, without supplies, and without a flight plan. The jump to hyperspace rattled the ship so hard Saren thought the rivets would pop, when the stars finally stretched into the comforting blur of light speed. The silence that filled the cabin was deafening. There was only one bunk. The rusty bucket was built for a solo hauler. The sleeping quarters were a closet with a mattress. Jace stood in the doorway, looking at the bed, then at Saren. I can sleep in the pilot's chair, Jace offered. Do not be ridiculous, Saren said, shedding the heavy wool cloak. You have been awake for 30 hours. You need sleep if you are going to fly us into a war zone. She sat on the edge of the bunk. It creaked under her armored weight. We will share, she stated. It is efficient. They lay down in the dark, the only light coming from the hyperspace swirl outside the viewport. The bunk was narrow. They were forced together, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. Saren had stripped off her outer plating for comfort, leaving only the mesh undersuit. Jace could feel the heat of her skin, burning like a furnace. Neither of them slept. The air in the small room grew thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and unwashed skin and terror. They were two fugitives at the edge of the universe, and the space between them felt charged with enough voltage to jumpstart a star. "Jace!" Saren whispered. Her voice was low, stripped of its royal cadence. "Yeah? I am afraid," she said. "Of the council? No. Of this?" She turned her head. In the dim light, her eyes were pools of molten gold. "I want you," she said. The words hung in the air, raw and terrifying. "I want you too much. It feels like hunger. It feels like a defect in my coding." Jace's breath hitched. He turned to face her. His hand hovered over her waist, not daring to land. "Saren, but you must understand," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I am not soft. Jace, I do not know how to be gentle. If we cross this line, if I let you in, I will consume you. I will demand everything, and I will hurt you." Jace looked at her. He saw the fear behind the arrogance. He saw a woman who had been trained to be a weapon, terrified that she would destroy the only thing she didn't want to break. He reached out and rested his hand on her cheek. His thumb brushed the hard line of her jaw. "The Empire is built on taking," Jace said softly. "They take planets. They take minds. They take lives." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I am not them. Saren, I want you, God, I want you, but I won't take what you don't freely give. And I won't ask for more than you can handle." Saren let out a shuddering breath. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For a moment, the war didn't exist. There was only the hum of the engine and the beat of two hearts in the dark. "Sleep," Jace whispered. "We have work to do tomorrow." She didn't pull away. She fell asleep with her hand gripping his shirt, as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. They dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates the dragon had sent. It wasn't a military base. It was a graveyard. Floating in the silence of the ash wastes was a debris field of ancient ships, and hidden within the cloud of wreckage was a station that didn't appear on any star chart. They docked manually to avoid tripping sensors. The airlock cycled with a groan of rusted gears. They were met not by guards, but by a ghost. A Draconari male, old and withered, sat in a floating wheelchair in the center of the entry bay. His scales were gray with age, and his eyes were covered by cybernetic implants. I wondered if anyone would ever hear the signal. The old man rasped. "Who are you?" Saren demanded, her hand going to the blaster at her hip. "I am what is left of the conscience of the Empire," the man said. "I am Dr. Eris. I was the lead architect of Project Auric." Saren lowered her weapon slowly. "Eris, you were listed as dead." "I wished I was," Eris said. He led them into the station. It was a laboratory, filled with half-finished prototypes of neural interfaces. "You know what the dragon is," Eris said, wheeling himself to a console. "You know it is a choir of the damned, but you do not know why the right exists." "To find a rider strong enough to control it?" Saren said. "No," Eris corrected. "To find a genetic match." He pulled up a holographic display. It showed a double helix, the cognition core. "The mind of the dragon is unstable. It is chaos. To focus it, to weaponize it, it requires a master key, a biological resonance that can force the voices into alignment." He pointed to Saren. "You, princess, it was built for you. Your DNA was the template for the control lattice. The Council does not need a warrior. They need a battery. They need you to sit on the throne, connected to the beast, your mind acting as the filter for its rage. And if I refuse? Saren asked, her voice cold. Then they will use your corpse, Eris said bluntly. They can harvest the resonance from your dead tissue, provided the brain is intact. That is why they want you captured. Alive is better. Dead is acceptable. Jace felt sick. They built a monster and keyed it to your blood. It gets worse, Eris said. There is a failsafe. If the dragon is fully enslaved, if the Council forces the remote link without the stabilizing presence of the resonance, the core will go critical. Critical? Jace asked. It will detonate, Eris said. It is an antimatter containment breach. It will vaporize the capital. The Council wants to trigger a crisis, Jace realized. The endgame. They let the dragon explode. They blame Saren. They say she was a terrorist. Then they swoop in, save the survivors, and declare martial law. They burn the world to rule the ashes, Saren whispered. The alarm klaxon cut through the conversation like a knife. Proximity alert, the ship's computer screamed. Multiple signatures detected. They found us, Jace shouted, sprinting for the airlock. How did they find us? The tracer, Saren realized. The one they injected you with. It must have had a dormant secondary frequency. They scrambled back onto the rusty bucket. Jace fired the engines before the airlock was even decoupled. The ship lurched away from the station just as a squadron of bounty hunter interceptors dropped out of stealth. Hold on, Jace yelled. He threw the ship into a spin. Blaster fire raked the hull. The shields dropped to 40% instantly. We have been boarded, Saren shouted, checking the internal sensors. They clamped a breach pod to the cargo bay. Take the stick, Jace ordered. I am a princess, not a pilot of garbage scows. Fly the ship. Saren, keep us moving or we are target practice. Jace grabbed a heavy wrench and a plasma pistol. He ran for the cargo bay. The gravity generators took a hit. The artificial gravity failed. Jace floated into the cargo bay. It was a cavern of drifting junk, spare parts. Crates of rations and loose tools floated in a chaotic cloud. The airlock blast doors blew inward. 3 armored figures jet-packed into the room, their magnetic boots locking onto the walls. Jace kicked off a bulkhead, diving behind a floating crate of engine coolant. Plasma bolts sizzled past him, boiling the air. He fired back blindly. He saw one hunter's shield flare. Then Saren was there. She hadn't stayed in the cockpit. She had engaged the autopilot and followed him. She moved in 0G like she was born to it. She launched herself from the ceiling, her claws extending. She didn't have a gun. She didn't need one. She hit the first hunter with the force of a missile, driving her claws through his shield generator. He screamed as his suit depressurized. Jace! Behind you, she shouted. Jace spun, floating. A hunter had lined up a shot with a disruptor cannon. There was no way to dodge. Saren didn't shout. She shoved off the wall, putting her body between Jace and the weapon. The beam hit her. It wasn't a lethal shot. Her armor took the brunt of it, but the kinetic impact shattered her pauldron and sent her spinning into a jagged piece of scrap metal. A sharp strut of steel pierced the mesh of her undersuit at the side, between the armor plates. Saren! Jace screamed. He fired his pistol, a lucky shot that hit the hunter's fuel cell. The hunter exploded in a ball of fire that was quickly snuffed out by the vacuum suppression system. The last hunter fled, detaching the breach pod. Jace kicked off the wall, catching Saren as she floated, limp, in the center of the bay. Blood, dark, almost black in the dim light, was floating up from her wound in perfect crimson spheres. We need atmosphere, Jace yelled at the ship's AI. Seal the bay, restore gravity. He carried her into the medbay as the gravity slowly returned, making her heavy in his arms. He laid her on the table. Saren, stay with me, Jace pleaded, his hands shaking as he tore open the medkit. She hissed in pain, her eyes fluttering open. I am intact, she groaned. It is just a scratch. It is deep, Jace said, pressing a clotting pad to her side. You took a disruptor blast for me. Why did you do that? You are the important one. You are the key because... Saren gasped, grabbing his wrist. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were fierce. Because you are the pilot. I can teach you to fly. Not the ship. Jace, the dragon. She coughed, wincing. You look at me and you do not see a princess, she whispered. You do not see a genetic key. You see a woman. That is why the dragon listens to you. It craves that. It craves to be seen. Jace stopped working. He looked at her. Her face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. He didn't care about the blood on his hands. You scared me, he whispered. Do not ever do that again. I cannot promise that, Saren said. Love is a tactical liability. No, Jace said, pulling back to look at her. Love isn't softness. Saren, it isn't a weakness. It is choosing someone else, even when it costs you, even when it hurts. That is the strongest thing there is. Saren looked at him, her defenses finally shattering. Then choose me, she whispered. Until the end. I already did, Jace said. They reached the hidden shipyard 2 hours later. It was a cavernous asteroid, hollowed out by ancient mining drones. Inside, hanging in the dark like sleeping gods, were dozens of metallic dragons. They were incomplete. Some were just skeletal frames. Others were half-armored. They were silent, dead metal. In the center of the cavern lay the primary interface console. It was the master control for the entire Auric project. Jace helped Saren limp to the console. She was bandaged, pale, but upright. Here, Eris said over the comms channel. This is the source. You can access the core programming of the active dragon from here. You can free it. Jace plugged in. The screens lit up with a blinding array of data. I found the inhibitors, Jace said. I can break the chains. I can delete the slave protocols. Do it, Saren said. I can't do it alone, Jace said. He pointed to the screen. The system requires a dual input. It needs the genetic resonance to unlock the door, and a stabilizer mind to rewrite the code. What does that mean? Saren asked. It means you have to put your hand on the panel and authorize the release, Jace said. But that destroys your claim. If you free the dragon, the system logs it. You renounce your royal command. You will never be Empress. The Council will have legal proof that you abdicated. I do not care about the crown, Saren said. And, Jace continued, looking at the second input pad, someone has to merge with the dragon's mind to guide it out of the dark. Someone has to link their brain to that storm of angry souls and show them the way home. He looked at the neural headset hanging from the console. It could burn out the user's mind, Jace said quietly. It is raw voltage. A human brain isn't built for that kind of traffic. Saren looked at the headset, then at Jace. No, she said. I will do it. You can't, Jace said. You are the key. You have to hold the door open. If you let go of the resonance pad, the system locks down. Saren stared at him. The realization hit her. You have to do it, she whispered. Jace picked up the headset and it looked heavy. It is just a wiring problem, right? He said, forcing a smile. Jace, if you die, I won't die, Jace said. I have too much to live for now. He looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't hide the way he felt. Ready? he asked. Saren placed her hand on the resonance pad. The panel glowed gold, recognizing her bloodline. "Ready," she said, tears standing in her eyes. Jace put the headset on. He closed his eyes, and he screamed. The Great Crucible was no longer a pit of blood and sand. It had been transformed into a stage for the final act of a political tragedy. The black volcanic floor had been scrubbed clean, the blast craters filled, and the towering pylons draped in the crimson and gold banners of the High Council. 10,000 spectators filled the tiers. But the mood was not the raucous bloodlust of the right. It was a heavy, suffocating anticipation. They knew something was ending today. They just did not know if it was the war or the empire itself. In the center of the arena, the metallic dragon stood frozen. It was not moving. It was not screaming. It stood like a statue of lethality, its massive alloy wings folded tight against its back. The neural dampers were humming at a frequency so high it was audible only as a pressure in the sinuses. The council had not just chained it. They had lobotomized it, high above, in the gilded luxury of the council box. Archon Vale stood before the microphones. His voice, amplified to godlike proportions, rolled across the stadium. Citizens of Virkal. Vale boomed, his arms spread wide. For generations, we have feared the beast. We have sacrificed our bravest sons and daughters to the chaos of its mind. But today, the council brings you order. Today, we bring you peace, down in the maintenance trenches that ran beneath the arena floor. Jace wiped sweat from his eyes. He was wearing the gray, grease-stained jumpsuit of a sanitation technician, a cap pulled low over his face. He was carrying a fusion welder that was actually a high-yield data spike. "He talks too much," Jace whispered into his collar mic. "Focus," Saren's voice came back, sharp and clear in his earbud. "Are you at the primary pylon?" "Almost," Jace said, ducking under a security sensor. "I am 20 feet out. The security is tighter than a drum. If I sneeze, 3 sniper drones are going to turn me into pink mist." "You have 2 minutes," Saren said. "Then I make my entrance." Jace reached the base of the massive obsidian pylon. It was humming with power. This was the anchor point for the neural dampers. If he could splice the shipyard interface patch into this junction, he could override the council's control and open a channel to the dragon's core. He knelt in the dirt, popping the service panel with a magnetic pry bar. The interior was a nightmare of optical cabling. "Okay, big guy," Jace muttered to the dragon standing 100 yards away. "Time to wake up." Above him, Vale continued his speech. "We have determined that the royal right is obsolete," the Archon declared. "Why rely on the strength of one warrior when we possess the wisdom of the many? The council has assumed direct control of the asset." Jace's hands flew across the wires. He stripped the shielding on the main trunk line. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. 60 seconds, Saren whispered. I am working, Jace hissed. Suddenly, the massive arena screens flickered. The image of Vale was replaced by a static-filled logo of the royal house. Not the current one, but the ancient crest of the warrior kings. The heavy blast doors at the south end of the arena, the ones reserved for emperors and conquerors, began to grind open. The crowd gasped. Vale froze mid-sentence. Out of the darkness, Saren walked. She was not hiding. She was not sneaking. She was a supernova clad in living metal. She wore the full regalia of the heir apparent. Her armor polished to a mirror sheen, the bioluminescent patterns on her neck pulsing with a furious golden light. Her horns were crowned with platinum, and her cape of ballistic silk trailed behind her like a river of blood. She walked into the center of the arena, into the crosshairs of 100 cameras, And she did not look at the council. She looked at the dragon. "She is here," a voice screamed from the crowd. "The traitor princess, security!" Vale shrieked, his composure cracking. "Seize her! Kill her!" Saren stopped. She raised one hand, palm out. "I am Saren of the line of Virkal," she shouted, her voice unamplified but ringing off the stone walls with the clarity of a bell. "And I demand the right!" The crowd roared. They were confused, terrified, and thrilled. This was theater. This was legend. "Jace, now!" Saren commanded over the comms. Jace jammed the data spike into the trunk line. A spark of blue electricity arced from the panel, scorching his gloves. "Patch is in," Jace yelled. "I am initiating the handshake." In the center of the arena, the metallic dragon twitched. The dead, blue light in its eyes flickered. A low growl, like the grinding of tectonic plates, vibrated from its chest. Vale saw the dragon move. He saw the crowd turning. He panicked. "Override!" Vale shouted to his technicians. "Activate the submission protocol. Force it to kneel. Show them we own it." A high-pitched whine tore through the air. The council's remote signal hammered into the dragon's brain. The beast screamed, a sound of digital agony, and its legs buckled. It didn't kneel out of respect. It collapsed. Its head was forced down into the sand by invisible hands. It looked broken. It looked tamed. "See?" Vale crowed, pointing a shaking finger. "The beast submits to the council. The age of the dragon riders is over." Saren stood 10 feet from the groaning beast. She saw the humiliation in its posture. She felt the shame radiating from it. She looked up at the council box, her eyes burning with a hatred that could melt steel. "It is not a beast," she screamed. "It is a prisoner. And you are not taming it. You are torturing it." "Silence her," Vale ordered. A squad of council guard drones swooped down, weapons charging. Saren drew her blade, a long, curved edge of vibrating diamond. She didn't retreat. She stood her ground between the dragon and the drones. "Jace, I can't hold them off forever," she yelled. "Free the mind! I am trying!" Jace shouted back. He was tapping frantically on his datapad, fighting the council's firewall. "They have a lockout. It is a deadlock. I need a direct connection." "What does that mean?" "It means wireless is too slow," Jace yelled, ripping the datapad from the pylon. "I have to plug directly into the dragon's skull. You will be killed. Cover me." Jace broke cover. He sprinted from the pylons, dashing across the open sand toward the thrashing dragon. The drones saw him. Laser fire chewed up the ground at his heels. Saren moved. She was a blur of violence. She leaped into the air, her gravity boots flaring, and intercepted the drone squadron. She sliced the wing off the first, kicked the second into a spin, and used the wreckage of the third as a shield against the incoming fire. "Go!" she screamed at Jace. Jace slid under the dragon's neck. The heat was unbearable. The reactor in the beast's chest was going critical from the stress of the conflicting commands. He found the interface port behind the dragon's jaw. He jammed his universal connector into the slot. He didn't just type commands this time. He put on the headset he had stolen from the shipyard. He hit enter, and the world dissolved. There was no arena. There was no sand. There was only a storm of white noise and screaming. Jace was standing in a hurricane, but the wind wasn't air. It was memory. Thousands of fragmented voices tore at him. Target locked. "Mother, I'm cold. Altitude warning. Freedom. Death to the Empire. I didn't want to die." Pain. Absolute blinding pain. The neural dampers were not just chains, they were a constant electrical fire burning through the synapses of 1,000 stolen minds. Jace fell to his knees in the virtual void. The pressure was crushing his skull. Silence. The command came from the Council's override. It was a monolith of black code, towering over the chaos, forcing the voices into a single robotic line. Submit. Jace grit his teeth. He visualized a wrench, a simple, rusted wrench. No, Jace whispered in the mind storm. He stood up. He visualized the wrench growing, becoming a hammer. He swung it at the monolith. You don't have to listen to them, Jace shouted into the psychic wind. The monolith cracked. A fissure of light appeared. And through the crack, Jace saw the heart of the dragon. It wasn't a monster. It was a frightened child. It was a coalescence of fear, a huddled mass of consciousness that had been beaten until it believed that obedience was the only way to stop the pain. Jace walked toward it. The storm raged around him, but he kept his rhythm. Step, pause, step, pause. The same rhythm he had hummed in the arena. You will burn, the voices screamed. I have fireproof skin. Jace lied. He reached the center. The presence there recoiled, expecting a whip. In the real world, the dragon spasmed. Its wings flared open, knocking 2 drones out of the sky. A gout of blue plasma erupted from its maw, scorching the storm clouds above. The crowd panicked. The stampede began. Saren was fighting 3 guards at once. Her armor sparked and scored. She saw Jace slumped against the dragon's neck, his body seizing as the neural feedback hit him. Jace! She killed the last guard with a brutal backhand strike and scrambled up the dragon's foreleg. She reached Jace. His eyes were rolled back, blood trickling from his nose. He was dying. The connection was frying his brain. Saren didn't pull him off. She knew that would kill them both. She did the only thing she could. She completed the circuit. She reached out with her bare hand, ripping off her gauntlet, and pressed her palm against the dragon's molten cheek plating. Her genetic resonance, the master key, slammed into the system. Inside the mind storm, the sky turned gold. Jace looked up. Saren was there, not as a princess, but as a burning avatar of will. She didn't attack the monolith. She walked past Jace, straight to the cowering presence at the center. She knelt. The proudest woman in the galaxy knelt in the mud of a virtual mindscape. I am sorry, Saren spoke. She used the High Draconari, the language of truth. I am sorry we made you a weapon. I am sorry we stole your names. The presence looked at her. It recognized her blood. It recognized the source of its pain. It raised a hand to strike. Jace stepped in. He didn't block the strike. He caught the hand. He is not your enemy, Jace said to the dragon, looking at Saren. And she is not your master. Saren looked at Jace. She saw him holding the storm back with nothing but stubborn human empathy. She stood up. In the real world and the dream world, she locked eyes with him. She spoke the words that would shatter the empire. If you are a true warrior, she said, her voice echoing through the shared mind, tame my metallic dragon. It wasn't a challenge this time. It was an invitation. Jace looked at the dragon. He smiled. You heard the lady, Jace whispered. But here is the secret, big guy. You don't have to be a weapon to be worth something. He offered his hand. You can just be free. The dragon took it. In the great crucible, the silence was absolute. The metallic dragon lowered its head. The red anger in its eye lenses faded, replaced by a clear, luminous blue, not the blue of the reactor, but the blue of a calm sky. The heavy steel collar around its neck hissed. The locks popped. With a sound like a gunshot, the neural dampers shattered. They fell to the black sand in useless, twisted heaps. The dragon shook its head, a massive cat-like movement. It inhaled deeply, tasting the air without the filter of pain for the first time in a century. Then, it turned. It did not look at Saren. It did not look at Jace. It looked up at the council box. It recognized its captors. The announcer's screen, glitching from the feedback, flashed the brutal record one last time. 96 failed. Then the numbers scrambled and reset to 0. One success. The crowd stopped running. They turned to look. Jace pulled the headset off, gasping for air. He was alive. Saren stood beside him, her hand still resting on the dragon's face. Up in the box, Archon Vale was screaming into his radio. "Kill it! Use the orbital batteries! Vaporize the arena!" Nothing happened. "Why are the batteries not firing?" Vale shrieked. "Because," Saren said, her voice amplified by the dragon's own vocal synthesizers, booming out to the entire city. "I have released the archives." The massive screens around the arena shifted. They were no longer showing the right. They were showing documents, video logs, funding trails. The faces of the council members appeared, overlaid with the logos of the off-world syndicate, a rival galactic power. The crowd saw the truth. They saw the payments. They saw the blueprints for the dragon, listed as Asset 44, destabilization device. "Vale is not a patriot," Saren shouted. "He is a puppet. He built this dragon to fail. He built it to blow up this city so his masters could buy our world for scrap." The roar that went up from the crowd was not worship. It was revolution. Vale looked at the mob below. He looked at the dragon glaring at him with the eyes of 1,000 murdered pilots. He snapped. He pulled a high-caliber disruptor pistol from his robes and aimed it, not at the dragon, but at Saren. "I will end the line right now." Vale screamed. He fired. Jace saw the flash. He didn't think. He shoved Saren. The bolt hit Jace in the shoulder. It spun him around, cauterizing the flesh instantly, and dropped him to the sand. "Jace!" Saren screamed. She didn't look at Vale. She looked at Jace falling. Vale leveled the gun for the kill shot on the princess. But the metallic dragon moved. It didn't breathe fire. That was too slow. It simply snapped its tail. The sonic boom shattered the glass of the council box. The tail tip, moving at the speed of sound, pulverized the podium where Vale stood. The Archon disappeared in a cloud of masonry and dust. The remaining council members fled. Saren dropped to her knees in the sand. She pulled Jace into her lap. "Jace! Jace! Look at me!" Jace blinked. His shoulder was a ruin of burnt fabric and flesh, but he was conscious. "Did we win?" he wheezed. Saren was crying. She didn't care who saw. The tears cut tracks through the grime on her face. "Yes," she sobbed. "You idiot. You human idiot. We won." Jace grinned, his teeth red. "Good. Now, can we get a medic? I think I am leaking." Saren looked up. The dragon was hovering over them, its massive body acting as a shield against the rest of the world. It lowered its head, nudging Jace gently with a snout that could crush tanks. The crowd was swarming the arena floor, not to attack, but to see, to witness. Saren looked down at Jace. She pressed her forehead against his, her blood mixing with the soot on his skin. She was shaking, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a wave. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "You can't get rid of me that easily," Jace whispered back. "You promised me a political seat, remember?" "I don't want a seat," Saren said fiercely. "I don't want a champion. I don't want a hero." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I want you, Jace. Just you." Jace reached up with his good hand and touched her face. "You got me, princess." Above them, the metallic dragon reared up. It spread its wings, spanning the width of the arena. It threw its head back and unleashed a roar that shook the storm clouds apart. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a declaration. The chains were gone. The dampers were gone. The beast was dead. The sovereign had risen. The smoke over the capital of Virkal did not smell of war anymore. It smelled of ozone, melted circuits, and the terrified sweat of 1,000 bureaucrats shredding documents. The civil war that had threatened to consume the empire had stalled, suspended in a breathless moment of shock. The footage of Archon Vale trying to execute Princess Saren and the metallic dragon defending her had been beamed to every holoscreen from the core worlds to the Rim. The narrative had shattered. The Council were not the saviors of order. They were the architects of a prison. But truth, Jace had learned the hard way, did not pay the bills. And it certainly did not fix a government. He stood on the balcony of the royal spire, his left arm in a regenerative sling that hummed softly as it knit his cauterized flesh back together. Below him, the city was a tapestry of chaos. Riots had turned into street parties. Statues of council elders were being pulled down by jubilant mobs using mining cables. "It is a mess," a voice said from behind him. Jace turned. Saren stood in the archway. She had traded her battle-damaged armor for a tunic of dark silk, embroidered with the silver thread of mourning. She looked exhausted. She looked smaller without the metal, but her eyes were still burning with that terrifying golden intelligence. "It is a beautiful mess," Jace corrected. "Better than a tidy cage." "Is it?" Saren asked, stepping onto the balcony. She leaned against the railing, looking down at her burning city. 3 systems declared independence this morning. The Southern Fleet is refusing to answer my hails until I clarify my position on the monarchy. And the trade guilds are threatening to blockade our food imports if the riots damage their warehouses. Sounds like a Tuesday for a mechanic. Jace shrugged. Something is always leaking. Something is always overheating. And the customer is always yelling. You just tackle the biggest fire first. And what is the biggest fire, Jace? Trust, Jace said immediately. Nobody believes anyone anymore. Vale proved that the people in charge are liars. You have to show them you are different. Saren looked at him. She reached out, her fingers hovering near his sling. "And you?" she asked softly. "Do you trust me?" Jace looked at the city, then at her. "I am still here, aren't I?" The first test of the new order came 2 days later, in the grand hall of the Draconari High Lords. It was a cavernous room of black marble and gold, filled with the heads of the great houses. These were the warlords and matriarchs who controlled the Empire's armies and resources. They had come to see if the princess was a conqueror or a corpse. They got neither. They got a negotiation. Jace stood in the shadows of the gallery, watching. He felt out of place in his borrowed formal wear, a stiff, high-collared jacket that scratched his neck. He wanted his grease-stained flight suit back. Saren sat on the obsidian throne, but she did not wear the crown. It sat on a pedestal next to her, empty. The lords were restless. Lord Krail, a massive Draconari with scars crossing his snout, stepped forward. "The council is dead," Krail rumbled. "Vale is dust. You have the dragon. You have the power. Seize the title of Empress Absolute. Saren, crush the rebels. Restore order. It is the Draconari way." Saren looked at him. Silence stretched in the hall, heavy and sharp. "The Draconari way got us 96 dead sons and a machine built of tortured souls," Saren said, her voice cutting through the room. She stood up. She didn't draw a weapon. She picked up a datapad. "I am not declaring myself Empress Absolute," she announced. A murmur of shock ran through the lords. "I am proposing a charter of limits," Saren continued. "The monarchy will remain, but the cognition capture program is banned. Forever. No more stolen minds. No more living weapons." "And the dragon?" Krail demanded. "The ultimate weapon? Who controls it?" "No one," Saren said. She gestured to the massive view screen behind the throne. It showed the metallic dragon, resting in the arena. It wasn't chained. It was being tended to by technicians, and Jace's team of hackers, who were carefully removing the last of the neural clamps. "The dragon is a sovereign entity," Saren declared. "It has agreed to serve as a guardian of the peace, protecting evacuation corridors and trade routes. But it answers to a charter, not a throne. It chooses its riders, and it can refuse an order." "Weakness," Krail shouted. "You give our greatest asset the right to say no?" "Strength," Saren shouted back, her voice cracking like a whip. "A weapon you have to enslave is not strength, Krail. It is a liability waiting to explode. We saw that in the arena. Real power is cooperation. Real power is a fleet that follows you because they believe in you, not because they are afraid of your pet monster." She looked around the room, meeting the gaze of every lord. "I am not building another cage," she said quietly. "I am building a future. Join me, or get out of the way." Later that evening, the political tension broke in the only way it could. With a diplomatic summit that was dangerously close to a farce, the delegation from the Rim systems had arrived to discuss the ceasefire. Jace was required to attend. Saren insisted that the hero of the arena needed to be seen. "I hate this," Jace whispered to Saren as they stood in the receiving line. "Smile," Saren murmured, not moving her lips. "You are a symbol of interspecies cooperation." "I am a mechanic who needs a shower," Jace muttered, "and these pants are too tight." The ambassador from the Rim was a tall avian creature with iridescent feathers and a beak that looked sharp enough to open a can of beans. He approached Jace, bowing low. "The human conqueror," the ambassador chirped. "We are honored. We offer you the traditional greeting of our people." The ambassador extended a claw holding a small gelatinous sphere that smelled of fermented algae. Jace panicked. He didn't know the protocol. Was he supposed to eat it? Hold it? Bow to it? He panicked and popped it into his mouth. Saren went rigid beside him. The ambassador stared. The entire room went silent. Jace chewed. It tasted like spicy soap. He swallowed, fighting the urge to gag. "Delicious," Jace choked out. The ambassador blinked. You ate the ancestral pearl?" Saren closed her eyes. "Is that not what I was supposed to do?" Jace asked, sweating. "It is a symbol of our grandmother's spirit," the ambassador said, horrified. "You are supposed to warm it in your hand to show respect for the elderly." "Oh," Jace said. "Oh no." He looked at Saren. "Help me." Saren stepped forward, her face a mask of perfect diplomatic serenity, though Jace could see the vein in her temple throbbing. "The human custom," Saren lied smoothly, "is to internalize the spirit of the ancestor, to carry their wisdom inside the body. It is the highest honor a human can bestow. He has made your grandmother a part of his soul." The ambassador paused. He tilted his head. "Truly?" he asked. "Truly," Saren said. "He is deeply spiritual." The ambassador beamed. "Remarkable! I must tell the others." He bustled away. Jace let out a breath he had been holding for a minute. "You," Saren hissed, grabbing Jace's arm and dragging him behind a potted fern. "You are a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. You ate his grandmother. You didn't give me a manual." Jace defended. "I thought it was an hors d'oeuvre." Later, in her private chambers, Saren made him pay for it. "Repeat the vow of the high houses," she commanded. Jace stood in the center of the room, wearing his unbuttoned collar and a look of misery. "I pledge my honor to the stone," he recited. Again," Saren said, sitting on her desk, trying to look stern but failing to hide the amusement in her eyes. "Pronunciation?" "Jace, you said stone like cheese." "I pledge my honor to the stone," Jace said, enunciating carefully. "To the fire that forges and the wind that cools." Better, Saren said. Now the bowing. Jace groaned. I bow to no one. That is my brand. Remember? Saren hopped off the desk. She walked over to him, the silk of her dress rustling. She stopped inches from him. You bowed to the dragon, she said softly. That was different, Jace said. That was respect. Then show me respect, she whispered. The air in the room changed. The humor evaporated, replaced by the heavy magnetic pull that had been there since the first day in the arena. Jace looked at her. He saw the woman who carried the weight of a fracturing empire. He saw the scars on her neck where the armor usually sat. He didn't bow. He reached out and took her hand. I don't offer you submission. Saren, Jace said, his voice low and rough. You have enough people kneeling to you. You need someone who can stand next to you and tell you when you have spinach in your teeth. Saren laughed, a startled, genuine sound. Is that what you offer? She asked. Dental hygiene and defiance? I offer me, Jace said. Just me. No titles, no games. I am not a duke. I am not a lord. I am the guy who stays. Saren's expression softened into something raw. The council offered you a planet, she said. I saw the draft proposal. You could have left. You could have been rich. I don't want a planet, Jace said. Planets are heavy. What do you want? Jace stepped closer. He placed his hand on the back of her neck, his thumb brushing the bioluminescent scales. I want to know if you are okay, he said. Beneath the silk, beneath the armor. I want to know if you are still scared. Saren leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. Terrified, she admitted. I don't know how to do this, Jace. I was trained for war. I wasn't trained for peace. And I wasn't trained for this. For what? To be loved, she whispered, without it feeling like a weakness. Jace pulled her forehead down to rest against his. It is not a weakness, he said. It is structural integrity. 2 pillars hold more weight than one. Saren let out a shuddering breath. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. They stood there for a long time, not as princess and hero, but as 2 survivors clinging to the wreckage, grateful for the warmth. I am difficult, Saren mumbled into his coat. I am imperious. I have a temper. I know, Jace said. I am stubborn. I eat heirlooms. I leave grease on the furniture. We are a disaster, Saren said. We are a team, Jace corrected. The investigation into the conspiracy brought the final bitter twist of the knife. Jace and Saren sat in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays of financial data. They had traced the funding for Project Auric, the money that had built the dragon, paid the bribes, and bought the silence of the council. It didn't come from a rival empire. It didn't come from a crime syndicate. It came from the Pan-Galactic Humanitarian Guild. Jace stared at the logo rotating in the air, a pair of open hands holding a star. The Guild? Jace said, disbelief coloring his voice. They are the ones who build hospitals. They run the refugee camps. They are the good guys. They are the investors, Saren said, her voice cold as 0 Kelvin. Look at the subtext. She expanded the file. The Guild had been funding the instability in the Draconari Empire for 50 years. They funded the Separatists to start the war, and they funded the Council to build the weapon to end it. Why? Jace asked. Because a stable empire doesn't need loans, Saren said, reading the report. A stable empire manages its own resources, but a broken empire, a war-torn hellscape, that needs aid. That needs reconstruction contracts. That needs oversight. They wanted us to collapse, Jace realized, so they could come in as saviors and buy the rights to the Virkal mines for pennies on the credit. Archon Vale wasn't a mastermind, Saren said, turning off the display. He was a middleman. He was selling his own people into debt slavery disguised as charity. "This is the lesson," she said, looking at Jace. "This is what I have to tell the people." "It is a hard truth," Jace warned. "People like heroes. They don't like finding out the heroes are bankrolling the villains." "Better a hard truth than a comfortable lie," Saren said. "That is what you taught me in the arena." The final piece of the puzzle was the dragon itself. Jace spent his days in the hangar, working with the remaining Draconari scientists. The dragon was no longer screaming. It was waiting. Jace plugged into the console. He didn't use the full immersion headset, that was too dangerous for casual conversation, but he watched the data streams. The dragon communicated in images now. A sensation of rain, the smell of burning fuel, a child's laughter. It was a library of memories. "We have to let them go," Jace said to the team. He designed the Exodus protocol. It was a software patch that allowed the individual consciousnesses within the dragon to separate. Those who wanted to fade to finally die could do so. It took 3 days. Jace watched the monitors as thousands of signal spikes flatlined one by one. It wasn't death, it was release. It was the sound of a prison emptying, but not all left. Some stayed. Some of the minds, pilots, warriors, protectors chose to remain. They coalesced into a new, stable intelligence. It wasn't a chorus of pain anymore, it was a council of guardians. The metallic dragon opened its eyes. They were a deep, steady blue. "Jace," a voice spoke in his mind. It wasn't a scream, it was a synthesis of 100 voices speaking in harmony. "Hey," Jace said, leaning against the massive snout. "How is the head?" "Quiet," the dragon replied. "Clear. We are ready." "Ready for what?" "To fly, not to burn, to watch." "You are a good kid," Jace said, patting the metal. The day of the new Accord dawned with a sky the color of bruised peaches. The smog was clearing, the volcanic vents finally settling. Saren stood on the great balcony of the palace. Below her, 1,000,000 citizens gathered in the square. They were not cheering blindly, they were listening. Saren did not wear armor. She wore the robes of a magistrate. "We have been taught that strength is dominance," she told them. Her voice amplified across the city. "We were taught that to lead is to own. We were wrong." She gestured to the sky. From the hangar, the metallic dragon launched. It was magnificent. Without the chains, without the pain, it moved with a fluidity that defied physics. Its alloy wings caught the morning light, gleaming like a second sun. It did not roar in anger. It dipped its wings in a salute, then banked toward the horizon, heading for the border systems to stand guard over the fragile peace. "Strength without empathy is tyranny," Saren declared. "Tradition without truth is a cage. Today, Virkal breaks the cage." Jace watched her from the side of the stage. He saw the way she stood, not as a goddess above them, but as a woman standing with them. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Lord Krail. "You refused the dukedom," the old warlord grunted. "I did," Jace said. "You refused the money. I have enough for ship repairs. That is all I need." Krail looked at him with grudging respect. "You are a small man, human, in a galaxy of giants." "Maybe." Jace smiled, watching Saren command the attention of a world. "But small parts keep the engine running. And if you ignore the small parts, the machine explodes." Krail huffed, a sound that might have been a laugh. "Do not break her heart, mechanic," Krail warned, "or I will hunt you to the edge of space." "She is the one with the claws." "My lord," Jace said, "I am the one in danger." The ceremony ended. The crowds dispersed. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the mist. Saren found Jace sitting on the edge of the landing pad, his legs dangling over the precipice. He was watching the dragon, a silver speck in the distance, patrolling the clouds. She sat down next to him. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. Her skin was cool, the metal of her rings pressing against his palm. "It is done," she said. "For now," Jace said. "Tomorrow, the trade unions will strike, the pipes in the lower city will burst, and someone will try to assassinate you again." Saren smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I look forward to it." They sat there, a mechanic and a queen, watching the world they had broken and the world they were building. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, political, and fragile. But it was theirs. "You know what they are saying?" Jace asked, nodding toward the city below. "The legend. Tell me. They are saying 96 warriors failed." Saren squeezed his hand, her golden eyes reflecting the dawn. "And the human won." She finished. Jace laughed, swinging his feet over the abyss. "I didn't win. Saren, I just stopped fighting the dragon and started listening to the music. That is how you win." "Jace," she whispered, kissing his cheek. "That is the only way anyone ever wins." From the clouds above, a distant metallic roar echoed, a sound of joy, ringing like a bell across the free sky of Virkal.